Hey everyone, welcome back to Robotics. I hope you guys are doing well. Today we have our 13th lecture on singularities. So to get us started, I've got a video. Now this is a video of a humanoid robot doing different tasks around the house. You'll see it watering the plants, tossing these different oranges, cleaning this table. And at first glance, this robot seems very impressive. But there's a secret. And the secret is that there's someone behind the scenes who's remotely controlling the robot and showing it how to do all these different tasks. So this idea of a robot maybe not living up to its full potential is going to become very relevant for today's lecture on singularities. So today I first want to start off with interpreting the Jacobian matrix and kind of explaining the intuition you can get about your robot just by looking at that Jacobian matrix. And then second, I want to introduce the concept of singularities. All right, so let's pick up with where we left off in our last lecture. Now, in the previous lecture, we found this robot's Jacobian. I want to just briefly recap the robot. I've got my ground. I've got my spatial frame attached to the ground right here. I've got my first link. I've got my joint. This is a prismatic joint that allows the robot to translate up and down. And then I've got my revolute joint right here, another link, and then the robot's end effector. So this is a robot with 2 degrees of freedom, 1 prismatic and 1 revolute joint. And then on the right, you can see the Jacobian that we found for this robot arm. The Jacobian is a 6x2 matrix that captures the relationship between the robot's joint velocity and the linear and angular velocity of this robot's end effector. Okay, so if you have this Jacobian or the Jacobian for some other robot you're interested in, what can you learn about that robot by just looking at the Jacobian matrix? You can actually extract a good amount of information. I want to show you how. So reminder, the Jacobian is a 6x(n) matrix, where n is the number of joints. And I want to convince you that the top 3 rows of the Jacobian, those are going to capture your angular velocity, and the bottom 3 rows of the Jacobian, those will capture your linear velocity. So to show you or convince you why that's the case, let's look back at our Jacobian equation. On the right, I've got my joint velocities. Here's my Jacobian matrix. And I know that if I multiply j by theta dot, I get my end effector velocities. The idea is I can measure my joint velocity. I want to figure out how fast is my end effector moving in space or some other point of interest on my robot arm. All right, so let's use the example to kind of look at this equation a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to plug in my equation. And for my robot, the example robot, it's got 2 degrees of freedom. So I'm going to have theta 1 dot and theta 2 dot. That'll be my joint velocity. Then here, I've got my Jacobian matrix that we found in the previous lecture. Again, this is a 6x2 matrix, and the output is a 6x1 vector. That's my twist v. Now, we haven't thought about the twist in a little bit, but let's look at the different elements of that twist vector. First, it's got omega x, which is the angular velocity on the x-axis, and then similarly, it's got omega y and omega z to capture the angular velocities around the y and z axes. That's the first 3 elements of this twist. Now, the bottom 3 elements, those are my linear velocity. The linear velocity px dot in the x-axis, py dot in the y-axis, and pz dot in the z-axis. So I've got angular velocity and linear velocity. Again, both of those are in xyz, xyz. All right. So let's just think about the matrix multiplication that occurs here. So if I multiply my Jacobian by my joint velocity, what am I getting for these different values? And we can just go element by element. Let's look at omega x. That's going to be the angular velocity in the x-axis. Well, if I look at it, using my rows and columns, right? I've got 0 times theta 1 dot, 0 times theta 2 dot. All right, that's the expression I'll use to find omega x. So this first row of the Jacobian is going to tell me exactly what's going to happen for omega x. The same is going to be true for the second row, will tell me about omega y, and the third row will tell me about omega z. The same thing is true for my linear velocity. If I look at my 4th row, I'm going to have 0 times theta 1 dot minus L sine theta 2. That's going to be multiplied by theta 2 dot, and that will give me px dot. So each row of the Jacobian is telling me about a different element of my twist. And so if you kind of go through that process, you'll recognize that the first 3 rows of the Jacobian, those are going to tell you about the angular velocity, and the bottom 3 rows will tell you about the linear velocity. And just to put a name on this so we can call them later, let's say that the first 3 rows are j omega. That'll be the angular component of my Jacobian. And then the bottom 3 rows will be jv. That'll be the linear component of my Jacobian. Again, I'm not introducing anything new here. I'm just taking my existing Jacobian and splitting into the first 3 rows for angular velocity, the bottom 3 rows for linear velocity. All right, so once we understand that, let's think about how we interpret this Jacobian with an example. So looking at my robot arm and then my Jacobian over here on the left, in what directions can the robot's end effector not move, either rotate or translate, no matter what joint velocities we have? So no matter how you actuate theta 1 or theta 2, in what directions can this robot arm not move its end effector? Maybe pause the video, think about it. And you could be looking at the physical robot, or actually you could just look at this Jacobian matrix. Let me show you how you can deal with just the Jacobian matrix. Now, if you look at it, you realize that omega x is going to be equal to this first row multiplied by my joint velocity. So it'll be 0 times theta 1 dot plus 0 times theta 2 dot. Well, that means that omega x is always going to be equal to 0, no matter what I'm doing with my joint velocities. Mathematically, that's saying that I cannot have any angular velocity around the x-axis, and the same is true about the y-axis. So I can't have any angular velocity around either the x or the y-axis based on these rows of all zeros. All right, so that's what the math is saying. Does that match our physical intuition? Let's look at the drawing on the right. I recognize that yes, this robot can rotate its end effector around the z-axis, no problem. But it is true that it cannot rotate around either the x or the y-axis. For the x-axis, it would have to spin in this direction. For the y-axis, it would have to spin in this direction. And neither of those are possible based on the way I've aligned my joints and links for this specific robot arm. So here you can see an example of where the math is matching up with the diagram. And that's what I want to show you, kind of the intuition you can gather just by looking at this Jacobian. I don't even have to look at the robot physically. I realize immediately from the Jacobian, all right, this thing can never have any sort of angular velocity around x or y. The same is true if I start looking at the linear velocity. Now here I notice that I've got a row of all zeros for p of z dot. That means that this robot can never have any linear velocity in the z-axis. And that also makes sense if I look at the drawing. The z-axis is coming out of the screen towards you, and yep, this thing can never move in that z-axis, either going into or out of the screen. So the Jacobian is telling you a little bit about how your robot can and can't move. All right, that was a bit of an easier one. Let's try a harder one. As the joint position theta changes, how does the robot's ability to move change? Are there some positions where it can move in some directions but can't move in others? And how does that change as I start changing this joint position theta? Well, in order to answer this question, I want to focus on the linear motion in the x and y axes. So I'm going to be looking at px dot and py dot. That's going to correspond to the fourth and fifth rows of my Jacobian matrix. So I want to isolate those. So again, I haven't really changed anything. I'm just looking at those two specific rows of my Jacobian, and that's what I have right here. So I'm looking at those rows. All right, here's the fourth and fifth row. I'm going to multiply them out. I'm going to get these two expressions for px dot and py dot. Now for py dot, this is telling me about the linear velocity in the y-axis. I realize I've got theta 1 dot, which means, yep, I can actuate this first prismatic joint to move this thing up and down, and I can always do that. So I will always be able to move this thing up or down just by using my first prismatic joint with this velocity theta 1 dot. Good. It's a little bit more interesting though if I look at px dot. Now this is the linear velocity in the x-axis. I see that that is equal to negative L theta 2 dot times sine of theta 2. And I recognize that sine of theta 2 can become 0. It can become 0 either when theta 2 is equal to 0 or when theta 2 is some multiple of pi, for example, pi or 2 pi, etc. So at these configurations, my px dot is going to be 0. I cannot have any sort of linear velocity in the x-axis. And that's kind of interesting, right? Because in some configurations, this robot can move in that x-axis, moving left and right, but in other configurations, it can't. And I can kind of show you that visually right here. So if I look at the robot in these two configurations, here where theta 2 is equal to 0 and this one when theta 2 is equal to pi, it's very easy for the robot to move its end effector up and down, either actuating the first joint or the second joint. Both of those instantaneously are moving my end effector up and down, right? So it's very easy to have this sort of translation in the y-axis. But at those exact same configurations, it's impossible for my robot to instantaneously move in the x-axis. I cannot immediately move left or right. And maybe you want to take a second and physically think about that. Of course, this first joint just moves it up and down, so I don't need to worry about that. And then for this joint, I'm tracing a circle. So as I rotate that joint, I would just be rotating, if I look at the tangent lines, I'd be instantaneously moving up and down. So again, I can't immediately move left and right when my robot's in this configuration. And that is an example of a larger concept called a singularity. So a singularity is a joint position theta. Again, it's a joint position where your robot loses its ability to move either rotate or translate in one or more directions in which it could normally move. It'll be a lot easier for me to show you the losing ability to translate, so linear motion, but just a reminder that the same singularity concepts can apply to rotation. So maybe I could have originally rotated on the x-axis, but when I'm in a singular configuration, I no longer can rotate around that axis. Again, a singularity, you're losing your ability to move in a direction that normally you could either move, whether that's rotation or translation. Okay, and here's kind of a process you can use just to understand this singularity. So let's say K is the dimensions of the robot's task space. And I'll show you what each of these things means in a second. I just wanted to define them. So K, that's going to be the dimensions of the robot's task space. And the task space, that's kind of what I'm focusing on, like the aspect of the six-dimensional space that I really want to focus on for the robot. Now, J of T, that's going to be the rows of the Jacobian that correspond to the task space, and we'll call that the task Jacobian. And then the robot is going to be in a singularity if the rank of J of T drops below K. So K, that's the dimensions I can move. Let's say it's 2. If my Jacobian's rank drops below 2, that means my robot is in a singularity. Let me explain what these mean just through an example. I think it'll be a bit more clear. So to get started, let's talk about the dimensions of the robot's task space. So sticking with the exact same robot we've had before, here I've just drawn it in a different configuration, a different joint position. It's the exact same robot we've had before. And what I want to think about is the way that this robot moves in the X and Y plane. So here my task space is going to be two-dimensional. It's just the XY plane, just up and down, left and right. So I'm interested in how my robot moves in this XY plane. And so I'll have K is equal to 2 for this example. Now, because I'm looking at the X and Y axes, I want to look at the 4th and 5th rows of my Jacobian. And those are going to correspond to J of T, or the task Jacobian. You can see them right here. Again, I've just taken my entire Jacobian matrix and isolated the rows that correspond to what I'm focusing on. Because I want to focus on px dot and py dot, the linear velocity in the x and y axis, I'm going to pick the 4th and 5th rows of that Jacobian. All right, so now I've got J of T, and I understand that K is equal to 2. And so the robot will be in a singularity if J of T drops below rank 2. So here's my Jacobian in general. You can see what this is right here. And then here's these two specific joint positions that we mentioned earlier, when theta 2 is equal to pi and when theta 2 is equal to 0. And I'll notice that in both of these different joint positions, yes, I do in fact drop rank for this matrix. You'll notice that this 2 by 2 matrix, it can be rank 2, but when I'm in these configurations, I've got rows of all zeros, and that's going to reduce the rank of this Jacobian. So it'll be rank 1 here and also rank 1 here. And so yes, this is an example of a singularity because the robot's task space Jacobian is lower rank than K. All right, so I've started to introduce what a Jacobian is, and I want to practice this a little bit more and kind of talk about the different interpretations of Jacobian, as well as what singularities are in the next lecture. Before we move on, though, I'd encourage you to go through the practice set for today's lecture. As a reminder, it's in the description or the pinned comment. The first page are the problems, and the following pages have the solutions to those problems. So I've introduced singularities briefly here. I just kind of gave you an intuition of what they are. In the next lecture, what I want to show you is how you can actually mathematically find those singularities for your robot arm. So I'll see you there.